Why didn't the world end up speaking Chinese? When I first learned about the Chinese treasure fleet, the most fascinating question for me was whether history would have taken a different course if the Chinese hadn't abandoned their sea exploration. For those who don't know, in the early 1400s, with a huge fleet of massive ships, the Chinese reached as far as East Africa. But when the emperor died, his successors found the journeys costly and pointless, so they erased even the memory of the fleet. Zheng He, the admiral of the Chinese treasure fleet, didn't lack ships. He went on his first voyage with around 250 ships. His crew consisted of 27,000 people, as opposed to Columbus's 90. The biggest ships of Zheng He were far bigger. The Santa Maria was a mere 70 feet long. The historical accounts of the Chinese ships seemed so surreal that historians didn't give much credit to them until archaeologists found a ship from the fleet. This happened in 1973 in Changzhou. But when I read about the first voyage of Zheng He, it immediately struck me that he knew where he was heading. The treasure fleet was on a diplomatic mission to gain acknowledgement of the superiority of the Chinese emperor among kingdoms they already knew about. So, if this was the objective of the voyages, why on earth did China send a Muslim eunuch as an admiral to represent the realm? The Yuan dynasty was a Mongol-led imperial dynasty of China established by Kublai Khan after he conquered the southern Song dynasty. The Mongols were a small nation if we treat them as an ethnic group, but as nomads of the steppe, they had different concepts of nations and realms. For them, a realm was a corporation held together by benefits and fear. They appointed talented experts to run the empire. Serving the empire was rewarding. Letting down the empire had terrifying consequences. When the Mongols defeated the southern Song dynasty, they just introduced new management to the empire instead of tearing down the whole system. Mutual distrust was, of course, part of the struggle, so the Mongols installed officers from other parts of their empire, most notably from the equally educated Central Asian parts, today's Iran and Uzbekistan. This practice had a long-lasting effect. This was the reason Zheng He and other foreigners were even allowed to rise to power in a Confucian world. We have very little credible information about Zheng He's ancestors, as the chattiest source was written by Zheng He himself. Before he set sail to the west, he erected a monument for his father. On this monument he says that all his forefathers were faithful Muslims who fulfilled the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Now, emphasizing Muslim ancestry before visiting Muslim countries is quite reasonable, but Zheng He wasn't really following Islam, and he didn't really know his father or his family. He was taken from them when he was a boy to serve the Yongle emperor as a eunuch. Chinese dynasties run their empire through eunuchs. This struck me as a European for two reasons. First, eunuchs had little respect. Second, how was a tortured, mutilated human being considered a loyal servant of the emperor? Zheng He was 10 years old when the Ming army conquered Yunnan from the Mongols in 1381. His original name was Ma He, the son of a low-level official. In the 14th century, young boys from rebel or foreign families were considered valuable state property. The Ming court specifically looked for boys who appeared intelligent and physically robust. Ma He was reportedly quite tall and quick-witted even as a child. When he was taken to the palace with the other captives, castration was performed. This practice was so routine that there was a specialized class of officials in the palace whose sole job was to perform these surgeries and manage the recovery of the boys. It wasn't without risk. Only 2/3 of the boys survived the process, and even they were wrecked for the rest of their lives. Urinating remained painful forever, and keeping personal hygiene was very difficult, which caused a bad smell. Then came the re-education. It was a mixture of brainwashing and talent management. From this point on, they were considered the most trustworthy servants because they couldn't start their own dynasties. Eunuchs were despised not just in Europe. If they fell out of the grace of their master, they had no future elsewhere. Zheng He was assigned to the household of Zhu Di, the Prince of Yan, a brilliant and ambitious military commander. Zheng He was trained as a soldier. He fought alongside Prince Zhu Di in many northern frontier campaigns against the Mongols. He proved to be a master of logistics and military strategy. He also educated himself in the classics, becoming a rare blend of hardened warrior and a sophisticated diplomat. When the first Ming emperor died, a civil war broke out between Prince Zhu Di and his nephew, the legal heir. Zheng He played a pivotal role in the battles that allowed Zhu Di to seize the throne and become the Eunuch emperor. How did someone from a landlocked province, excelling in land battles, become the admiral of the most expensive fleet? Even better, with no experience in the navy, he was commissioned to organize the building of the entire fleet. If we have a quick look at the map, we can see that the most important trade routes left China by land. The biggest threat China faced was the Mongol invasion. Even after the end of the Yuan dynasty, the biggest risk was the return of the Mongols. Regarding the economy, trade wasn't valued. For individual trading units, sea trade was a thriving business, but as part of a huge empire, the profit was just a drop in the ocean. The Chinese government was run by Confucian scholars who valued stability, farming, and tradition. In the Confucian social hierarchy, merchants were at the bottom because they were parasites who produced nothing and only moved things around for profit. Confucian scholars believed China had everything it needed within its own borders. This directly affected military matters. The navy wasn't a distinct branch. The navy was a weapon in the hands of the same military elite as the army. This already explains the possibility of becoming a naval commander after fighting land wars. But Zheng He had much more in his pocket. He had spent years managing the logistics of the prince's household and massive campaigns. He knew how to move thousands of tons of grain, coordinate thousands of men, and manage a budget. To the emperor, the treasure fleet was essentially a moving province, and Zheng He was its governor. The building of the fleet was a matter of production. The newly appointed admiral hired specialists to design ships and organize the supply chain for the shipyards. His land-minded background left its footprint though. They also built farmer ships to cultivate and harvest healthy vegetables for the crew. This was to prevent scurvy, centuries before Europeans understood the disease. A reliable strategist and a good organizer, he was also a good diplomat with Muslim heritage. The purpose of the treasure fleet was to visit and gain acknowledgement for the Eunuch emperor. Zheng He did everything he could to be seen as a Muslim. Along his voyages, he built mosques and erected stone tablets containing messages of praise to Allah. He also sent a sub-fleet of his Muslim officers to perform the Hajj and bring back maps and information about the Islamic heartlands. Zheng He returned from his first voyage with a giraffe. He used it to convince the court that his voyages were bringing back the Qilin, a mythical creature of good omen, which justified the massive cost to the Confucian scholars. Then, why did they give up after 7 voyages? And could they have overpowered the Europeans? As you can see, the treasure fleet didn't want to colonize. But what if they had wanted to play the role that Portugal later played? Well, this would never have happened, as China needed nothing from outside its borders. So let's say a Chinese person from the future had traveled back in time to deliver the message. Wipe out the European fleet. Problem again. The struggle of China wasn't caused by the presence of European ships in the nearby seas. Sweeping the Europeans from the seas would have prevented nothing regarding the decline of China, but it would have boosted the Islamic countries, feeding China's very rivals. But let's say, just for the sake of Chinese pride, a unified European navy and the Chinese navy had clashed at the Horn of Africa. What would have happened? The treasure fleet wasn't just bigger, it was built differently than European ships of the time. The hulls were built with 2 or 3 layers of thick planks. If the outer layer was damaged, the ship remained watertight. The interior of the ship was divided into separate sealed compartments. If one section flooded, the other stayed dry, a technology Europe wouldn't master for centuries. For ships over 100 meters long, a standard rudder would be impossible to turn in shallow waters. The Chinese used a balanced rudder that could be raised and lowered, making the giant ships surprisingly maneuverable. Their navigation system was also superior to that of the Europeans. While Europeans had compasses, Chinese versions were highly refined, using a floating needle on a 24-point card. They also had rolling scores that mapped the entire route from China to Africa, marking every reef, landmark and safe harbor. European firepower was on par on a scientific level, but as Chinese ships were far bigger, they carried much more cannon and fire weapons than the Europeans. But all this was an overstretch for China. The voyages achieved acknowledgement, but didn't translate into loyal vassals or higher state revenues. In terms of security, the pricey treasure fleet left Chinese defense underfunded and vulnerable. Aside from exotic animals, it didn't spark curiosity in the society, didn't introduce desirable products to the market, and didn't boost trade in the end. So, the voyages had to end, and the fleet had to be forgotten. Or was it just the revenge of Confucian's scholars on the eunuchs for gaining more influence and abandoning Confucian values? My name is Istvan. I studied history, geography and global history. There is a lot to tell about the chapters here and beyond. And trust me, I would if I could create these videos faster. It is very likely that I will cover other pockets of Chinese history in the future, so subscribe and thanks for watching.